A homeless boy dragged a man from a sinking car. He had no idea that act of bravery would pull him into a world of dangerous power, fierce loyalty, and a new family that would stop at nothing to protect him. His entire city was about to change overnight. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The rain that night was a cold, needling thing, turning the city into a blur of wet neon and black puddles. Leo, who'd been 16 for 3 months but felt 100, huddled deeper into the doorway of a closed pawn shop. His sleeping bag was damp, his stomach a tight knot of emptiness. He watched the cars hiss by on the slick street, their headlights cutting through the gloom. He wasn't looking for trouble, he was just trying to be invisible. Up on the overpass, a set of headlights wavered wildly. Leo sat up, squinting. There was a screech of metal, a sound that was wrong, a sound that didn't belong. Then a pair of headlights pitched over the railing and arced down toward the black, swollen river below. The splash was huge, a deep, final thoom that was swallowed by the rain almost immediately. For a second, Leo just stared. The taillights of the car glowed a faint, eerie red under the water, like dying coals. Then they flickered out. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Not your problem," a voice in his head hissed. "Keep your head down, always keep your head down." But another image flashed in his mind. His own father, years ago, behind a steering wheel, glassy-eyed. No one had come for him that night either. Leo was moving before he could think better of it. He scrambled down the muddy embankment, his worn-out sneakers sliding on the wet grass. The river was high and fast from the storms, its surface churning. The car, a big black sedan, was already starting to sink, the nose tilting down into the deeper channel. He waded in, and the cold was a shock, a punch to the lungs that stole his breath. It felt like 1,000 icy needles stabbing his skin. He reached the car as the water swirled up to the windows. Peering through the driver's side window, he saw a massive figure slumped against the steering wheel, motionless. A big, bearded man in a leather vest covered in patches. The water inside the car was already rising, lapping at his chest. Leo yanked on the door. It was locked. He pounded on the window, but the man didn't stir. Panic, sharp and sour, rose in his throat. He looked around, saw a jagged rock on the riverbed, and grabbed it. With a cry that was half fear, half effort, he smashed the window. Glass exploded inward. The river water rushed in faster now, greedily. He reached in, fumbling for the seatbelt release. The man was a dead weight, heavy with muscle and leather. Leo unbuckled him and grabbed him under the arms. "Come on," he grunted, pulling with everything he had. The car groaned, settling deeper. With a final, desperate heave, Leo dragged the man out through the broken window and into the freezing river. The current immediately tried to take them. Leo locked his arms around the man's chest and kicked, fighting the pull of the water and the weight of his burden. It felt like an eternity, a battle against the cold and the dark, but finally his feet found the muddy bottom of the shallows. He hauled the unconscious biker onto the shore, collapsing beside him, gasping, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. The man wasn't breathing. Leo, who'd learned CPR from a board school nurse in a different life, rolled him over and started compressions on the broad, leather-clad chest. "Don't you die," he muttered through chattering teeth. "Don't you dare." He pinched the man's nose, tipped his head back, and breathed into his mouth. He tasted leather, river water, and whiskey. After what felt like forever, the man convulsed, coughing up a torrent of river water. He rolled onto his side, heaving, his eyes wild and confused. They landed on Leo, a skinny, soaked kid in thrift store clothes, and then on the sinking wreck of his car. His hand went to his vest, patting the soaked patches as if checking they were still there. "Kid," he rasped, his voice like gravel, You pulled me out." Leo just nodded, too cold to speak. The man, Mark, struggled to sit up. He looked at Leo, really looked at him. The shivering, the hollow cheeks, the desperate eyes that had seen too much. "You're freezing, you live around here." Leo shook his head, a tiny movement. "No." Mark's eyes hardened, but not with anger. With understanding, he winced, touching a gash on his forehead. All right, listen, you saved my life, that means something." He fumbled in his soaked jeans, pulled out a waterlogged wallet. The cash inside was ruined, but a business card in a plastic sleeve was mostly dry. It was black with a single small winged skull logo and a phone number. No name. "You take this. You get somewhere warm, dry, you call this number tomorrow." You tell them Mark sent you, you tell them what you did, they'll help you. Leo took the card, his numb fingers barely feeling it. I don't want. It ain't about what you want, kid. It's about what's right. Now go get out of the rain. Mark tried to stand, wobbled, and sat back down hard. I'll be fine. My people are coming. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. For Leo, sirens meant questions, police, social workers, the system. He couldn't. He gave Mark one last look, then turned and vanished into the alleyways, the black card clutched in his frozen hand. The next day, under a pale, washed-out sun, Leo stood in a phone booth, the card in his hand. He was hungry, tired, and the cold from the river had settled deep in his bones. This was stupid. This was a one-way ticket to more trouble, but the memory of the man's eyes, the weight of his promise, pushed him. He dropped a coin and dialed the number. It rang once, a rough voice answered. Yeah. Mark sent me, he said to call. I pulled him out of the river last night. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Then the voice, now deadly serious, said, Stay where you are, don't move, describe the phone booth. 20 minutes later, 2 motorcycles rumbled to a stop in front of the booth. The men were big, bearded, covered in patches that screamed danger. One of them, a man with icy blue eyes named James, looked Leo up and down. You the kid? Leo nodded, fear making his throat tight. Get on, James said, nodding to the back of his bike. It wasn't a request. They took him to a bar called The Vault. It wasn't like any bar Leo had ever seen. The windows were blacked out. Motorcycles were lined up outside like steel horses. Inside, it was dark, smelling of beer, leather, and old smoke. The room was full of men who looked like Mark, and they all stopped talking when Leo walked in behind James. At a large round table in the back, Mark sat, his head bandaged, a bottle of beer in his hand. He looked older in the light, his face a roadmap of hard living, but his eyes lit up when he saw Leo. There he is, he boomed, his voice filling the quiet room. The kid who fishes out Hell's Angels. A murmur went through the crowd, Hell's Angels. The words hit Leo like a physical blow. He'd saved a biker gang member. He felt the room tilt. Mark stood a little stiffly and put a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder. This boy, he announced to the room, dove into the Blackwater last night. I was trapped, drowning. He smashed a window, dragged me out, and breathed life back into me. He didn't run when the sirens came. He stayed until I was breathing. He looked down at Leo. What's your name, son? Leo, he whispered. Leo, Mark repeated. You got family, Leo, a home. Leo shook his head, staring at the floor. Mark's hand squeezed his shoulder. You do now. He turned to the room. This boy is under my protection. He is a friend of this club. You see him on the street, you treat him like you'd treat my own blood. He needs something, he gets it. He's in trouble, you get him out. Are we clear? A chorus of clear, Sergeant at Arms, and yeah, Mark, rumbled through the bar. Leo didn't fully understand the title, but he understood the respect in their voices. That was the day everything changed. Mark, true to his word, didn't just give Leo a handout. He gave him a hand up. First, a room above the vault, small, clean, with a real bed and a lock on the door. The feeling of safety that first night was almost overwhelming. Then clothes that fit. Food, hot and plentiful, served by a no-nonsense but kind cook named Rita who called him scrawny and piled his plate high. Mark also gave him a job. I don't believe in free rides, kid, you'll work for it. The work was simple at first, sweeping the floor of the vault, wiping down tables, helping Rita in the kitchen. It was honest work, and for the first time in years, Leo felt useful. The club members. These scary-looking men with their gruff voices and tattooed knuckles began to treat him with a rough, unexpected kindness. A man called David, who looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands, taught him how to change the oil on the motorcycles, speaking in slow, patient tones. James, the one with the ice blue eyes, would quiz him on his schoolwork, making sure he was keeping up with the tutor Mark had quietly arranged. But it wasn't all work. There were light-hearted moments too, like the time Leo tried to help Paul, the club's treasurer, with a new spreadsheet on the computer. Leo, who was quick with tech, pointed out a formula error. Paul, a bear of a man with a graying beard, squinted at the screen. What's that now? The computer's lying. No, you just told it to add the wrong cells, Leo said, smiling a little. Paul blinked, then let out a huge laugh that shook his belly. A runaway kid is gonna save the club from bankruptcy. Mark, you brought us a genius. From then on, Paul called him the accountant, a nickname that made the other members chuckle. Leo also met Mercy, Mark's daughter. She was a few years older than him, with her father's fierce eyes and a wild cascade of dark hair. She worked as a nurse, and she didn't take any nonsense from the bikers, including her dad. The first time she saw Leo following her father around like a lost puppy, she planted her hands on her hips. "Dad, you collecting strays again?" she asked, but her eyes were warm when they landed on Leo. "This one's special," Mark grunted. "He's got guts." Mercy started coming around more often. She'd bring Leo books she thought he'd like, and they'd talk on the fire escape outside his room. She was the first person his age he'd spoken to in months who didn't look at him with pity or suspicion. There was a spark there, a charged, unspoken thing that made his heart beat faster when she smiled. Once when she reached over to brush a smudge of grease from his cheek after he'd been helping David, her fingers lingered for just a second too long, and the air between them crackled. He caught a faint scent of her perfume, something like vanilla and sunshine mixed with the ever-present leather and oil of the vault. He leaned in just slightly, and for a breathless moment he thought she might too. But then she pulled back, her cheeks tinged pink, and changed the subject to the book he was reading. The moment was gone, but the memory of it stayed, warm and electric. One afternoon, about a month after the river, Mark called Leo into his small, cluttered office at the back of the vault. The walls were lined with photos of motorcycles, old club runs, and men who were no longer around. "Sit, Leo," Mark said, gesturing to a chair. He looked serious. "You've done good here, you're smart, you keep your mouth shut, you see things but you don't gossip." He leaned forward. "The clubby, we are more than just guys who ride bikes. We have businesses, interests. It's an empire, kid, and empires need good people to run them, not just muscle, brains too." Leo listened, his pulse quickening. This was the other side of the life, the part that wasn't about camaraderie or free meals. This was the mafia lifestyle hidden beneath the patches. "I want you to start learning," Mark said. "From Paul, from me, you'll still sweep floors, but you'll also listen. You'll see how things really work. But you need to understand something, and this is non-negotiable." His gaze was like iron. "This life, it gives, but it takes. You see nothing, you hear nothing. You are loyal to the club, to me above all else. That's the price of the roof over your head and the food in your belly. You walk away now, no hard feelings. You stay, you're in." Leo thought of the cold doorway, the empty stomach, the relentless fear. He thought of the warmth of the vault, Rita's cooking, David's patient lessons, Mercy's smile. He thought of Mark, who had looked at him and seen a person, not a problem. "I'm in," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. Mark nodded, a satisfied glint in his eye. "Good, then your first lesson starts now." The lessons were a whirlwind. Leo learned that the vault was just the front. The club's real money came from other places, a few legit auto shops, a towing company, and in whispers, other ventures that were less legit: protection, underground racing, moving certain kinds of merchandise. Paul showed him how the money flowed, how to make dirty cash look clean, how to keep the books just confusing enough. Mark taught him about loyalty, about reading people, about the quiet, unspoken power the club held over the city's underworld. One evening, Leo was in the office with Paul, going over inventory sheets for the auto shop. A man burst into the vault, his face panicked. He was a small-time shop owner who paid the club for protection. Two enforcers from a rival crew, the Devil's Daggers, were trashing his store right now, he said, laughing at the Hell's Angels patch on his wall. Mark listened calmly. He looked at Leo. "Come on, time for a different kind of lesson." They rode to the shop, a dusty auto parts store. Inside, two large men were indeed throwing parts off shelves, laughing. They froze when Mark walked in, followed by James, David, and Leo. "Evening, boys," Mark said, his voice pleasant but cold as the river. "I hear you have a problem with my friend's decor." One of the men, trying to be brave, sneered. "Maybe we do. What's a washed-up angel gonna do about it?" Mark didn't even move, he just looked at him. James and David stepped forward. What happened next was fast, brutal, and efficient. It wasn't a brawl, It was a message. In less than a minute, the two men were on the floor, groaning, their threat completely neutralized. No guns were drawn, just sheer, controlled force. Mark turned to the shop owner. "Your premiums are paid up. This won't happen again." He then looked at the men on the floor. "You tell your boss that this block, this shop, this city is ours. You come into our kingdom again, you won't walk away. Now get out." They scrambled to their feet and fled. On the ride back, the thrill of the power was intoxicating. Leo had never felt so safe, so part of something unshakable. He was no longer a homeless boy. He was connected to the most powerful force on these streets. That night, Mercy found him on the fire escape, looking out at the city with new eyes. "You went with them tonight," she said softly, not a question. He nodded. "My dad's world, it's not all bar fights and Brotherhood, Leo. It's dark. It eats good people." "He saved me," Leo said simply. "He thinks you saved him," Mercy replied. She sat down beside him, their shoulders almost touching, the city lights reflected in her eyes. "Just be careful. I've seen that look before. The thrill. It makes people do stupid things." "What look?" he asked, turning to her. "Like you're not afraid of anything anymore." She was close, so close. The charged chemistry from before was back, amplified by the night's adrenaline. He could see the pulse beating in her throat. His gaze dropped to her lips. The world narrowed to the space between them. This time she didn't pull away. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to stop him. She didn't. Their lips met, a soft, tentative touch that exploded into something more. It was a kiss filled with all the unsaid things: loneliness, gratitude, danger, and a desperate, growing want. Her hands came up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. He kissed her back, tasting the promise of a different kind of life, one that was warm and sweet and his for the taking. It was a stolen, fiery moment on the edge of a dangerous world. When they finally broke apart, breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "That was a stupid thing," she whispered, but she was smiling. "Yeah," he breathed. "It was." For a few weeks, life was a dizzying, perfect balance. Leo had a home, a purpose, a secret education in power, and stolen moments with Mercy that felt like something out of a dream. He was learning the Empire, and he was good at it. He saw how the pieces fit, how fear and respect kept the machine running. Mark trusted him more, giving him small errands, letting him sit in on more meetings. Then, one rainy night, much like the one when it all began, the delicate balance shattered. Leo was making a delivery for Paul, a sealed envelope to a business associate in a quieter part of town. It was a test, a simple one. He parked Mark's old pickup, the one he'd been allowed to use, and went into the designated building. The exchange was quick, silent, but when he came back out, the truck was surrounded. 3 men leaned against it. They were Hell's Angels. They wore different cuts, devil's daggers. The leader was the same man James and David had put on the floor weeks ago. His face was mostly healed, but his eyes were pure venom. "Well, look what we have here." The man sneered. The Angel's new pet, the charity case. Leo's heart slammed into his throat. He tried to walk past, to get into the truck. A hand shot out, shoving him hard against the cold, wet metal. "We heard about you," the man hissed, his breath smelling of cheap beer. "The kid who pulled the big, bad Sergeant Tatarms out of the drink. You think that makes you special? You think you're part of something?" "I'm just running an errand," Leo said, trying to keep his voice steady. "An errand," the man laughed. He snatched the keys from Leo's hand. "See, we've got a message for Mark, and you're gonna deliver it." He nodded to his friends. They grabbed Leo, pinning his arms. The leader drew a knife, not to stab him, but to make a point. He grabbed Leo's left hand, the one that had pulled Mark from the car, and pressed the blade against the back of it. "This is for my pride," he whispered. The cut was swift and deep. Leo cried out, pain screaming up his arm. They let him go, shoving him to the wet pavement. The leader dropped the keys next to him. "Tell your boss the daggers aren't scared of a bunch of old men and their mascot. The East Side is ours now. This is just the start." They vanished into the rain, laughing. Leo clutched his bleeding hand, dizzy with pain and terror. He fumbled the keys, got into the truck, and drove back to the vault in a haze. He stumbled through the door, holding his bloody hand to his chest. The bar was full. The music died the second they saw him. Mark was at his table. His face went from concern to stone-cold fury in half a second. He was across the room before Leo could speak. Who did this? His voice was a low rumble that promised violence. Through gritted teeth, Leo told him, "The daggers, the message, the east side." A terrifying quiet fell over the club. This wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration of war, and they'd used Mark's protected kid to do it. It was the ultimate insult. Mark gently took Leo's wounded hand. The cut was nasty, but not tendon deep. Rita rushed over with a first aid kit, her motherly face tight with anger. As she cleaned and bandaged it, Mark never looked away from Leo's face. "They touched what's mine," Mark said, so quietly only Leo could hear. "They made this personal, you understand? This isn't business anymore, this is blood." Leo understood. The warm, safe world he'd been given had just shown its teeth. The Empire didn't give up its territory. It defended it ruthlessly, and he was now, irrevocably, a part of the battle. Mark stood and addressed his men. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. "The daggers have forgotten who runs this city. They've forgotten the rules. They hurt one of our own, a kid under my protection." He looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. "Tonight, we remind them." A savage grin spread through the room. Engines were gunned. Leather jackets were zipped. Leo, his hand throbbing, watched as the club transformed from a group of men into a single, focused weapon. James tossed him a heavy, clean rag. "Wrap it tight. You're coming. You need to see this. You need to know what happens when the family is disrespected." Mercury appeared from the back, her face pale. She saw Leo's bandaged hand, saw the men preparing for war. She ran to her father. "Dad, no, don't take him. He's just a boy." Mark cupped her face. "He stopped being just a boy the night he dove into that river for me. Tonight, he becomes a man in their eyes, and in ours." He looked at Leo. "You don't have to fight, but you will watch. You will see the cost of this life you're choosing." Leo, his blood singing with fear and a strange, dark excitement, nodded. He climbed onto the back of James' bike, his good hand gripping the cold leather jacket. Mercy stood in the doorway of the vault, her hands pressed to her mouth, tears in her eyes as the rumble of 24 Harley-Davidson engines shook the very street. They rode into the night, a thunderous procession of vengeance. Leo didn't know what was going to happen next, but he knew the city would be different after tonight, and so would he. The convoy of motorcycles was a rolling earthquake, shattering the quiet of the industrial east side. They didn't head for the Devil's Daggers clubhouse. That would be an all-out war, and Mark was smarter than that. He led them to a sprawling, run-down auto yard, a known Daggers cash operation where they chopped and sold stolen parts. It was their economic lifeline on this side of town. The bikes fanned out, blocking the entrance. The night watchman, a Dagger prospect, dropped his coffee and scrambled for a phone. James was off his bike in a flash, yanking the phone cord from the wall before the kid could utter a word. "Evening," Mark said, his voice calm as he walked forward. Leo stayed close to James, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, his bandaged hand pulsing with pain. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the club moved with a terrifying, silent efficiency. This wasn't a brawl, it was a surgical strike. David and 2 others went to the main power box and killed the lights, plunging the yard into darkness broken only by their bike headlights. Others moved into the shadows. Soon, the sounds began, the shattering of headlights and windshields on rows of cars, the hiss of punctured radiators, the deep, wrenching groan of metal being twisted. It was systematic destruction, a message written in ruin. From the back office, 3 daggers stumbled out, blinking in the headlights, reaching for weapons. They froze when they saw Mark standing illuminated in the beams, arms crossed, a king surveying the dismantling of a rival's castle. The leader from earlier, the one who'd cut Leo, stepped forward, his bravado shaky. "Markovich, you've lost your mind, this is our turf." Mark didn't even look at him, he nodded toward Leo. "You recognize my boy?" The dagger's eyes flicked to Leo, to the white bandage on his hand clearly visible in the light. Fear finally broke through his anger. It was just a message. "You sent your message," Mark interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Now you get mine." He took a single step forward, The air seemed to crackle. You cut the hand that pulled me from death. You think that makes you strong? It makes you a fool. That boy has more honor in his little finger than your whole rotten crew. He pointed a thick finger at the man's chest. The east side was always ours. You were just squatting. Now you're leaving. You tell your president he has 24 hours to clear every dagger business, every patch out of this city. If I see so much as a sticker after that, I won't be breaking cars. I'll be breaking spines, and I'll start with yours. The sheer, unshakable certainty in Mark's voice was more frightening than any shout. The dagger leader deflated, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He just nodded, unable to hold Mark's gaze. Good, Mark said. He turned his back on them, the ultimate show of disdain. Let's go home. The ride back to the vault was quieter. The adrenaline was draining, leaving Leo cold and shaky. He had just witnessed raw power in action, not the chaotic violence of the streets he'd known, but a disciplined, fearsome application of force with a single purpose. It was terrifying. It was also, in a dark way, awe-inspiring. Back at the bar, the mood was grim but satisfied. The deed was done. The line had been drawn. Rita shoved a hot mug of sweet tea into Leo's hands. Drink, you're white as a sheet. Mercy was waiting. She rushed to him, her eyes scanning him for new injuries. Seeing none, she hugged him tightly, then pulled back and smacked his good arm. You idiot, you could have been killed. I'm okay, he said, his voice hoarse. No, you're not, she said, but she leaned her head against his shoulder. Mark watched the exchange from across the room, a complex emotion in his eyes, part approval, part concern. The next 24 hours were a tense wait. Leo's world, which had slowly been expanding, suddenly felt very small and very dangerous again. He stayed close to the vault. Club members came and went, reporting snippets of news. Daggers were seen packing up their clubhouse, loading trucks. The city's underworld was holding its breath, watching to see if the Daggers would call Mark's bluff. They didn't. By the next evening, it was confirmed. The Devil's Daggers had abandoned the city, just like that. Their empire, at least locally, had crumbled overnight because they'd made the mistake of targeting the Hell's Angels, Sergeant at Arms, and his protege. The news spread through the streets like wildfire. The story grew in the telling. A homeless kid saved Mark, the Wall, Markovich's life. Mark adopted him. The Daggers touched the kid, and Mark wiped them off the map for it. Overnight, Leo's position in the city was transformed. He was no longer just a runaway, or even just Mark's charity case. He was a symbol, the kid whose actions had triggered a gang war and reshaped the city's power structure. When he walked down the street with James or David, shop owners he'd never met would nod respectfully. Rival lowlifes would cross to the other side of the street. He was untouchable, protected by the most formidable reputation in the city. Mark took him for a ride a few days later, out to a cliffside overlooking the city. They sat on the bikes, watching the lights come on in the twilight. You feel it, don't you? Mark said, not looking at him. The change, the fear they have now, the respect. Yes, Leo admitted. It's a drug, kid. Power is. It feels better than food, than warmth, than money. Mark finally looked at him, his expression serious. What you did on that river, that was pure, a good heart acting. What you saw in the auto yard, that was necessary. But it's ugly. This life, it's a beautiful prison. I gave you the key to get in. The lock is on the inside. You can never really leave. I don't want to leave, Leo said, and in that moment he believed it. He had a family, he had mercy, he had power. Mark smiled, a rare, genuine smile. I know, that's what I'm afraid of. He revved his engine. Come on, Rita's making meatloaf. Life settled into a new normal, but the stakes were higher, the shadows deeper. Leo's education accelerated. He sat in on meetings with crooked cops who were on the club's payroll, learning how to navigate those dangerous waters. He helped Paul launder money through the legit auto shops, his quick mind finding efficiencies even Paul had missed. He was becoming invaluable. His relationship with Mercy deepened, but it was fraught with the danger of their world. Their moments together were stolen and intense, a sanctuary of softness in a hard life. One night in his small room above the bar, with the sounds of the city a distant hum, things went further than just kisses. Clothes were shed not with frantic haste, but with a slow, aching need. It was his first time. She was gentle, gidding, whispering against his skin that he was safe, he was loved. It was a breathtaking, soul-searing connection that bound him to her and to this life even more completely. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, she traced the scar on his hand. "This is our life now, Leo," she whispered. "You, me, the club, it's all mixed up together. There's no separating it." "I don't want to separate it," he said, kissing her forehead, and he meant it. Months passed. Leo turned 17. The club threw him a birthday party at the vault. It was a rowdy, loud affair full of laughter, crude jokes, and a cake made by Rita that was almost as big as he was. They gave him gifts, new tools from David, a sleek leather jacket from James that fit him perfectly, a fat envelope of cash from Paul for the ladies, which made everyone roar with laughter. Mark's gift was last. It was a small, heavy box. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a simple, polished steel ring. It wasn't a club ring. Those were earned through years of prospecting and blood. This was different. Engraved on the inside were two words: family, loyalty. "Wear it on your right hand," Mark said, his voice thick, "so you never forget what matters." Leo slipped it on. It fit perfectly. He looked around the room at these rough, dangerous men who had become his brothers, his uncles, his father. He looked at Mercy, beaming at him from behind the bar, her eyes shining. He had never felt so belonged. Empires are always tested. A new threat emerged, not from a rival gang, but from within the city's political machine. A young, ambitious city councilman named Daniel Reed launched a very public, very vocal clean up the streets campaign. His primary target, the Hells Angels and their corrupting influence. He gave press conferences, pointing to the daggers' exodus as proof of the Angels' violent stranglehold. He promised raids, RICO charges, and a full-scale war on organized crime. The club was wary. Politicians were more dangerous than bikers. You couldn't intimidate a man with TV cameras and public sympathy on his side. Their legitimate businesses started getting hit with relentless city inspections, fire code violations, zoning issues, health department shutdowns at the bar. The pressure was mounting. Mark called a closed meeting. Leo was now a regular attendee. "Reed is a problem," Mark stated. "He's not looking for a payoff. He's looking for a scalp to hang on his belt for his election run. Ours." "We could lean on him," James suggested darkly. "Too public," Paul countered. "He gets a scratch, they'll send the feds down on us like a ton of bricks." Leo had been quiet, thinking. He'd been doing the books. He'd seen the patterns. "What if we don't lean on him?" he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "What if we expose him?" Leo continued. "He's talking about corruption. What if he's corrupt himself? Everyone has secrets." A slow grin spread across Mark's face. "The kid's learning. All right, how?" Leo laid out a plan. It was simple but risky. Councilman Reed was a family man, a churchgoer with a picture-perfect image, but he also had a taste for high-stakes poker games in a private club across town, games that were very much illegal. The club had loose affiliations with the people who ran those games. Leo proposed they get undeniable proof, photos, videos, financial records of Reed breaking his own laws. Then, instead of blackmailing him publicly, which could backfire, they would have a private conversation. They show him the evidence and suggest that his cleanup campaign might be better directed elsewhere. It was elegant. It used the club's connections without employing its usual blunt force. Mark looked at Leo with a pride that made the boy's chest swell. "You set it up, James, David, you make sure he's covered, no risks." The operation took 2 weeks. Leo, using a combination of Paul's underworld contacts and his own growing savvy, orchestrated it. He didn't get his hands dirty, but he directed the play. They got everything they needed: clear footage of Reed at the poker table, stacks of chips in front of him, a tumbler of whiskey in hand, records showing substantial, unexplained losses covered by shady loans. The day of the meeting, Leo went with Mark and James. They met Councilman Reed in a neutral, quiet location, a storage unit owned by a club associate that looked completely innocent. Reed arrived, smug and dismissive. "I hope you've come to discuss your surrender, Markovich," Reed said, smoothing his suit jacket. Mark just smiled and nodded to Leo. Leo, his heart pounding but his voice steady, laid out a tablet on a workbench. He played the video. He showed the financials. Reed's face went from smug to confused to ashen gray. His perfect image crumbled before their eyes. What is this? This is entrapment. It's reality, Councilman, Leo said, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. You're campaigning on morality while breaking gambling laws. The press would have a field day. Your career would be over. What do you want? Reed whispered, all fight gone. We want you to succeed, Mark said, his voice pleasant. Just somewhere else. Find another villain. The Auto Workers Union is always causing trouble. Or focus on litter. We don't care. But your war on us ends now. Your inspections stop. Your rhetoric stops. Or this, he tapped the tablet, goes to every news station in the state. Reed nodded, a broken man. It stops. Good, we have an understanding. Mark stood. Oh, and Councilman, if anything unfortunate should happen to me or my businesses or my family, he put a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder, including this young man here, a very specific package gets delivered automatically. To the FBI, understood. Reed nodded again, unable to speak. They left him there, standing alone in the cold storage unit. In the car, Mark let out a long breath, then laughed, a rich, genuine sound. He clapped Leo on the back. Kid, you just won a war without throwing a single punch. You're not just smart, you're dangerous. It was the highest praise Leo could have imagined. That night, the celebration at the vault was epic. The threat had been neutralized. The Empire was secure, not through violence, but through cunning. Leo was the hero of the hour. The members toasted him, ruffled his hair, called him the Brain. Mercy kissed him in front of everyone, a bold, proud kiss that drew cheers and whistles. Sitting at the head table with Mark, a glass of soda in his hand, he was still underage in the club's eyes. Leo looked around. He saw his family. He saw his kingdom. He saw the beautiful, dangerous, powerful life he had built from nothing but a single act of desperate courage on a freezing night. He had saved a man from a sinking car. That man had, in turn, dragged him out of the sinking ship of his own life. Now they were both captains of an empire sailing on dark but glittering waters. Leo looked at the steel ring on his right hand, gleaming in the bar light. Family, loyalty. He knew with absolute certainty that he was home. Thank you for joining Leo on his incredible journey. Can you imagine making one choice that changes your entire life forever? If you were in his shoes, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments below where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of impossible second chances.